Hi guys, welcome back to Art Healthy. I'm Shauna, and today I'm going to be doing actually running you through a tutorial of this mushroom that I painted. So I hope that you enjoy it. If you could also remember to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this, that would be very helpful for me as well as you. Okay, so first I'm getting started with a very, very light wash of purple, and I'm just kind of mixing a couple of different purples here. To be honest, when you're watching somebody else paint, I used to think that it really mattered that I get the exact color that they get, but that doesn't matter as much as value. So this has taken me quite a while to learn. I have been painting for 4 years, and I am just now starting to get down that values matter more than color, more than the color that you pick. Even if the colors clash, that doesn't really matter. What matters the most is that you are picking values that work together. So I'm keeping an eye on that when I lay down that purple wash. Now I am going to pick a very light color, because in the picture the stalk of the mushroom, I don't know if that's even the correct word, is this white color, but I'm noticing hues of yellow and even a little bit of blue in the shadows, and so I'm adding Naples yellow. I water this down quite a bit. It is my go-to for adding kind of some color to something that looks white. So that's what I did, and I didn't mind if some of it bleeds into it. It didn't end up bleeding, but I was just kind of explaining that I work from the bottom to the top with that stalk so that it has time to dry, and it doesn't just kind of bleed into the stalk of the mushroom. So now I am going to go in with a much darker I think I grabbed a Payne's gray, and I'm just adding some shadows and little lines and indentations that I see on the stalk of this mushroom. It's very helpful to have your reference photo pulled up as you're doing a painting, and I will be sure to link the reference photo for this in the bottom. But yeah, it's just very helpful to have it pulled up so you can see where to lay the colors in and everything. And I am going to apologize in advance about this stupid little sun glare that's at the top. It's eventually going to move over the top of the mushroom, and there's just not anything I can do about it. So yeah, we're zoomed in here, and I'm going to try and get out of the sun, but it doesn't end up working very well. Okay. So you can see how, because I did a wet on wet for that stalk of the mushroom, that the Payne's gray blended very, very seamlessly into the rest of the white of the stalk. And I'm taking a lot of liberties here. If you look at the reference photo that I'm using, I'm taking quite a few liberties. I just kind of see what colors stand out to me, and I add that in. That is a drying tool, and I would highly recommend getting one. It speeds up the time of your painting by just a lot. I think I can do things in half the time now. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with a darker purple, kind of like my mid-tone purple. And this is the part where you want to look at your reference photo a lot, and you're going to want to pay attention to where your lightest parts of the mushroom are. So for me, the lightest parts that I'm noticing, and you can kind of squint and look at your reference photo, and it brings out the darks and it brings out the lights. And I am seeing that the brightest parts are where the sun is kind of shining on the right-hand side. And again, I apologize for the top of the mushroom being cut off, but there's nothing I could do. Okay, so a lot of painting is kind of, especially with watercolor, because we have to work from light to dark. And I know it's the opposite for oils and acrylics, that you work from dark to light. The watercolors, you have to really pay attention to where your values are. There is, to a certain extent, you can change things, and you can scrub things out, and you can layer over top of things to try and fix things. But for the most part, you do have to be very, very conscientious of, or conscious where you're putting your lights and where you're putting your darks. So I'm kind of just doing negative space painting around the lightest parts that I see. and you can't see because it's in the little light glare at the top of the picture, but there is another little chunk of where I saw the light kind of shining on this mushroom that I left, you know, that light purple color instead of this darker mid-tone purple. And like I said before, it doesn't really matter what color that you grab for this. I mean, you could decide that you want a teal mushroom and then you go for that. Just make sure that you have mids and darks and very, very lights. Now I am just adding a bit more. I think I'm grabbing indigo here, and kind of there's a lot of lines and markings, so I'm kind of adding that in now with Payne's gray and indigo kind of mixed together, because I really wanted to play up the dark kind of indigo blue of the dark spots. And you can go in with your wet brush, rinse it out, get a wet brush, just barely wet, and you can kind of pick up color. You can see how I'm lightening areas. And you can even do this when the painting is completely dry. You just grab your brush, get it wet, and then dab at it with a paper towel, and you can lift quite a bit. You'd be surprised. So like I said before, I mean, nothing is not fixable. You can fix a lot of stuff. It's just maybe not quite as easy as it is in oils and acrylics. Okay, so now I see a bit of this yellowish hue at the base of the where the mushroom head meets the stalk. So I am playing that up again because yellow is going to fade quite a bit. I mean, all watercolor is going to fade, so you have to remember that you have to add sometimes more color than you would think. So I added quite a bit of yellow. I'm going back and I'm going to just darken the sides a little bit more, darken the divots in the stalk itself. You guys, if you know the proper terminology for mushrooms, leave it in the comments, because I am referring to it like it's a head of broccoli. Anyways, okay, so you want to make sure that layers dry in between. So you'll see me pull out my heat tool a lot to dry things, and that for me has been a big life changer too. It makes the difference between a really good painting and a really crappy one, because I didn't let everything dry first. So you can either let it dry or you can use a heat tool like I'm using. And I'm actually just going to let you see how many times I dry this, so you can see how many times I really am drying a lot. I'm drying like half of it's painting and the other half of it is drying the painting. So now basically from here you're just going in, you're looking at your reference photo. I'm wetting the entire thing because I really want soft edges. I want soft edges even kind of around where the my bright spots are. I want it to be soft there too. I don't want it to be such harsh lines. I'm adding in more even darker lines. This is kind of my dark mid-tone that I'm going in with. I'm going to have a very, very dark tone, but right now this just adds dimension. The more you get variations of lights and darks, and you can be really loose with it if you want. You can be really tight with it if you want and create something more realistic, but I really wanted it to be kind of loose, and as you can see, I'm splotching in some color. It's a very technical word, splotching. Dropping in some color just to add that texture. I love the way that watercolor separates and creates these granulations in the texture and the accidental blooms that happen. And that is one thing I will say about Schmincke. I've had kind of a harder time with it. These are my Schmincke paints I'm using, and I've been having a harder time with it because it is not as easy to control as, say, Holbein or even Sennelier. Sennelier is a dream to paint with. My Schmincke, this is the first painting, to be honest, that I've done where I feel like I felt good about it at the end. I've painted a couple others and not been so pleased, so I tried to be a little bit looser with it and just be more determined with my strokes and not trying to be so perfect, I guess you could say. So I really paid attention to, I'm trying to clean up those spots that I dropped. I'm trying to pay attention to making sure that I'm dropping in color where I want it, and that kind of stuff. So here I'm just going to add, this is dry on, I'm sorry, this is wet on dry, meaning that my brush is wet and I have wet paint, but the paper itself is dry. And that is going to give you those harder lines that you can see. But I still go in and I blend them out a little bit because I'm just not ready to have really stark lines yet. Don't really want them in the stock because I don't want them to draw attention away from the head of the mushroom, which I think is the more pleasant of the two. Okay, so I've decided that I'm going to add some dark indigo mixed with Payne's gray and a little bit of sepia to make it more of a mid-tone rather than a cool leaning grayish blue color. So by adding the sepia in there, you can kind of warm it up a bit. And I am, if you look at the reference photo, there is a lot of dark at the bottom of the mushroom. So I'm adding in the darkness at the bottom and then kind of just dragging lines up, and then I'm noticing that I need more lines to begin with just throughout the whole mushroom. If you look at it, there is a lot of markings, like I said, and lines, and so I'm adding a lot of that in there. So now I am adding that sepia tone again to the bottom because I just want I want the appearance of that mushroom casting, the head of the mushroom casting a shadow on the stalk. So adding that sepia tone, it just felt like it worked better for the stalk. I feel like the stalk is a little bit warmer in color right there. And I wanted the contrast between the cool and the warm. So, and here I am drying it again. Like I said, I will dry this so many times before it's done. And then it was very hard to see when I was actually painting this. I really didn't even know what it looked like until I picked it up just now. I've decided that it's worthy to continue though, I guess, because here we are. And finally fixed that little light lens glare. Thank God. I'm sure you guys are all thanking me profusely right now. Okay, so then I decided that I wanted a much more vibrant, brighter purple. So I wet the whole thing so that it's wet on wet and it has no harsh edges. And I dropped just the most vibrant purple that I have into that. And until you notice mostly into the lightest areas. And then I'm adding indigo, more indigo into the darker top left side. And now I'm just going in with more lines, more texture. The more texture I felt like this had, I felt like it just looked better with texture and lines. And now I'm going in with sepia over top of this Payne's gray and indigo mix down here on the bottom. Because if you look in the reference photo, there's actually a lot of, it's almost like this brown purpley color, and so I felt like the sepia would look really good over top of the Payne's gray and indigo and kind of give this brown purpley color. And so yeah, and I messed up, and you can see it's very simple. You just take a clean wet brush, wet the area, pick it up with a paper towel. You can fix anything with watercolor, you really can. You just have to act quickly. So again, just adding more lines to the bottom, especially where the way that there's like divots at the bottom of the mushroom head, where those connect. I'm adding more depth by just adding a darker line that goes up top. Drying again. Isn't this so exciting, guys? So much drying. And now I want more of those lines because I had such a hard time adding that texture in, and I'm not sure how to go about getting that texture, but there's lots and lots of marks on this mushroom, and so I just did the best that I could. And I'm adding different, because I'm noticing on the picture that there's like light purple marks, there's dark purple marks, there's almost like indigo colored marks. So I'm just adding them in different colors and hoping that it creates depth. And I think it worked okay. So Again, I mean, a lot of this isn't even for perfection. I didn't do this perfectly. I even debated putting this up, but to me, the goal of painting and the reason I paint has nothing to do with perfection. And it's all about the process for me. I found painting during a really low time, just had a lot of anxiety. And so for me, painting brought me so much peace. And so this is enjoyable for me. This brings me a lot of peace. So if you feel really overwhelmed or it feels daunting to attempt to paint something, like you look at a mushroom and you think, I can't paint that, and you just have to remind yourself it's not about whether it turns out perfectly. It's about you enjoying yourself. If it brings you peace and comfort, then you should paint and you should continue to do it, and don't worry about it being perfect. And so here I'm just closing it up by adding a black darker line. So that's it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.